Welcome to the SumerSports Show, Episode 1. This is Eric Eager. I am the VP of Research and Development at SumerSports. I'm joined by the CEO of SumerSports, Thomas Dimitroff. Thomas, this has been a long time coming. I'm really excited, not only obviously to join Sumer and get to work on all the great stuff that we're working on with you, but also to get to do this podcast. So I think it's going to be a never before heard collection of stories and anecdotes and advice from a data scientist like me and a former two-time executive of the year in the NFL like you. So Thomas, welcome.
I'm so excited about this, Eric. You and I have been talking for years, talking about football, talking about analytics. You've edified me along the way. Hopefully I have in some way or another. But to actually be here on a pod together, kicking off in a company that we're extremely passionate about. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better than, on an 8 o'clock at night or sometime, whenever it was, because we've had a bomber day today. It was a really busy day, but I'm looking forward to jumping in here and having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little background, I come from PFF, and hopefully I don't slip up, and you come from the Falcons and the Patriots, and before then the Browns and the Detroit Lions, and even some CFL experience back in the day. And as prior to joining Sumer, I was an avid CFL bettor. So that's always fun. But we're Sumer Sports now. If you go to SumerSports.com, there's a little bit of a summary about what we're doing. We're basically, working on roster optimization for NFL teams. We're going to, be a little bit close to the vest about what we're doing at Sumer Sports. But part of this podcast is to sort of talk and have maybe a few guests along the way, but also, impart some of the knowledge that we have. You can follow us on Twitter at Sumer Sports. We're getting that up as well. And this podcast is going to be available on all the podcasts and streaming, services that you can think of. We'll probably end up going live with this show a little bit as well. We're planning on 1 day a week, at least initially, with plans obviously to have a little bit more as well. Thomas, give me a little bit of your idea. Sumer Sports, this, there was the article about it in the Wall Street Journal. I think the cat's out of the bag as far as, what we're trying to do here. But from a CEO's perspective, how exciting is this opportunity? And give me a little bit of a summary on kind of the state of the state at Sumer.
Well, look, first of all, I mean, this was a big move for both of us in our own respective worlds. Me not continuing to pull at the possibilities in the NFL, and you, of course, flying high at PFF. For me, I had always wanted to be a part of a startup company, and especially a startup company that had something to do with my world, having been, being in professional football for almost 30 years. That was a big thing. Like I've said before to people, I didn't want to get into a startup company selling bowling balls or, who knows, I don't know, some pieces of furniture. I really wanted it to be involved with football, my passion, my art, my own, background. So I had an opportunity to team with, again, Paul Tudor Jones, the co-founder, along with his son, Jack Jones, both great people. Paul, a world-class macro trader. Jack, really, really intelligent, data scientist. And both of these guys had such passion for not only football and numbers, but also numbers. They are all about quantifying. And I loved it. And I thought this would be a great way for me to continue to grow, honestly, even beyond the point of going back and being, a help for a buddy of mine at an NFL team, to be some sort of a consultant. I thought I could learn a lot more about the next stages of potentially my career and beyond in an area, as you know, this league is evolving, and the league is moving much more in the direction of quantifying, of data analytics. And we're in the middle of it. And we know, and and I know now as it's going, the next 5 years are going to be unbelievably interesting to see how it all evolves. So I'm excited about being a part of it. We are going to, in our minds, we think that we have the possibility and the strong inclination to revolutionize the NFL in certain ways that has never been seen before. I know that's one of the reasons that you wanted to join this company, because there are some really, really interesting upsides. And I'll just toss it back to you, because I think it's really important for you to expound on that from a, quant side.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, both of us have worked with and for, great people in the industry. Arthur Blank is, from what you've told me and from what I know, a great human being and a great, owner there, and obviously at PFF, with Chris Collinsworth and Neil Hornsby, wonderful mentors, wonderful people. And yet when you get into this realm, you talk to, Paul and Jack. And then, on my side, it's, Paul Saban, somebody who I've admired a lot at ESPN as a data scientist, Sean Clement, who's worked for a couple teams in the league, a good friend of mine as well, Krista Hayes, and, people who have real experience in the NFL, who have, have had real success. You step into this dream team, and it's really humbling, and I think for folks like us, when you've been at the top, wherever you've been, the general manager of the Falcons, and me at PFF, where I built a great data science team. I think there's a lot of great people left over there, and I it was time to have a new energy, and it was time to in my opinion, spread your wings and work with a different group of people that'll challenge you in different ways. And I think that the problem that we're working on is incredibly challenging and incredibly, it has a lot of depth to it. It has a lot of diversity to it. And, I think it's going to open up a lot of different avenues for data scientists. It's going to open up a lot of different avenues for people who want to understand the game better. And I really can't wait. And like you said, I think, the folks that are going to be running the teams in the league 5 years from now, I think that the orientation is going to be slightly different, and in a good way. I don't think it's going to be completely quant based. I don't think it's going to be completely scouting based. I think what we're going to get is a blend of, what we're talking about on this show, which I find incredibly exciting. So just a little bit of, kind of a summary. Like we're planning on this episode coming out Wednesday night, Thursday morning, every single week. We plan on it being about 45 minutes, which, I made a joke to one of my friends. He's like, well, are you going to do a podcast? I was like, yeah, I'm going from having one co-host with great hair to another co-host with great hair. But but this one, this podcast is going to be a lot less lengthy, I think, than the one that I left, which is the PFF forecast. We're going to kind of keep it to about 45 minutes to 50 minutes a week, just so it's one commute and not necessarily two commutes, which I know my old podcast, because I'm so long-winded, ended up being. So we're gonna try for that, and obviously as time evolves, we'll certainly evolve with it, and we're really excited, obviously, to use both of our networks to bring on guests as well that will edify us.
By the way, to great point. I don't think you enunciated well, my brother. I think you said went from great hair. You meant to say to gray hair, not great to great. So we're working on that.
Look, I'm just so impressed as a 36-year-old guy who just started using product to make sure my losing hair decelerates. I'm just really impressed that you have yours still. That the kids say goals. I have like I said, my statement there was aspirational, if nothing else, there as well. So okay, well, let's start with the news, because I think what I want to do here is for us to break down the news of the NFL from my perspective, from your perspective, and kind of kind of have a discussion here. And interestingly, the NFL, in my opinion, has not been a great product this year, right? The number of great teams is pretty low. The number of great quarterbacks is pretty low. But as the NFL does, even in a league that's been sloppy and not particularly, crisp, we've had news stories. And I think the biggest one are a couple quarterback injuries. We have, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers tears rib cartilage, has an issue, obviously in the Chiefs game. He plays against Jacksonville the subsequent week. They lose by 28. He plays not quite the greatest game in the world in a win against Houston. And then you have the Tua Tagovailoa injury where, he stumbled around on the field in a game against Buffalo, a game that he came back into and they won, plays the next Thursday night on 3 days rest, takes a really big hit at Paycor Stadium, formerly Paul Brown Stadium, and ultimately is in a very scary situation with a concussion. He's been ruled out this week. From your perspective, when you look at these two things, when it's your quarterback and when it's your, the fifth pick in the draft and the sixth pick of the draft, what goes through your mind as an evaluator and as a general manager when you see those kind of injuries occur?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I think it's multi-layered, Eric, because first of all, there's a difference between if I'm looking at this from a general manager or former general manager perspective, that is, and of the person from afar, the down the street GM versus the guy who's in the middle of it. So I'm talking about, what they're dealing with in Miami and what they're dealing with Tua and what they're dealing with the concussion element of all this versus what they're dealing with out in LA with the Chargers, with Herbert, with rib cartilage. Those two GMs, I'm talking Chris Greer in Miami, and I'm talking Tom Telesco out with the Chargers. They have a very different case on their hands. And I guess what I'd say is completely different. I talked about Herbert a couple weeks ago, or last week, whenever it was, when we had a good in-depth discussion about it. As a general manager, I looked at the Herbert situation as much more accepting, of course. It is a cartilage. It's a rib cartilage. It's not a joint cartilage. We're not worried about that. We know that there's pain involved. We saw the wincing. We get that. It took conversation, I'm sure, with the head coach, the general manager, and the quarterback to decide where they were with that decision. I don't bemoan anyone in that organization for doing it. I wasn't worried about long-term injuries or issues. He truly wanted to make a big impact on his team by dealing with pain and playing with pain. And that was a big thing for that organization, I believe. Of course, they didn't get the win. I get it. This last week they did. Now you flip it over, however, the depth of what you're dealing with in Miami and what Chris Greer has to deal with as a general manager, not only his interaction with Mike McDaniels, and of course they have a good working relationship right now. They have a situation with their owner, of course, who's still suspended. They have stuff going on there. And now they have a situation where most people look back on it, of course, and say that was a mistake. There was concussion involved, whether it's said that they were taken care of in the right way, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, there was an issue with that. That is a deep, deep issue. That's not only an issue when it comes to how you navigate it with the media, Eric, but it is an issue within the room. Think about this as a general manager and Mike McDaniel, what he has to deal with. You saw he made it very, very clear to the masses. He is all about the players. He's all about the players. Everything he does is about the players. That is vital. If you're a team builder, general manager, or head coach, and there's a feeling within your building that you're not thinking about the players and that you're putting the decision in the potentially or ostensibly putting the decision in the player's hands, a young player like that, there's a lot of darts pointed your way.
Well, I think you hit on the biggest one, right? Because one of the reports that made me kind of cringe, and we talked about this when we were prepping for the show last week about Herbert, because it was a big story then, and you talked about how important it is for a quarterback to show toughness and how important it is in the locker room for the leader of your team to be not only one of the guys, but also, the guy taking the biggest risk. And I think with a cartilage injury, obviously there's risks. The risks are different than a head injury. And when I heard the report that Tua Tagovailoa was on an airplane sitting next to Mike McDaniel and they were watching a movie together or playing a game together, and I'm like, that sounds great, but like both of us played college football, right? Like, and I had a concussion and in college, and I remember being a little bit, and this was 2007, like I remember being a little bit pressured to go back in, and your teammates are out here battling, and are you ready to battle? And I think the average person doesn't understand that, once you've played football as long as Tua has, and once you've been through what Tua's been through, injuries, ankle, that kind of thing, you want nothing more than to be out there and to satisfy your coach and to satisfy the owner and to satisfy the fans. And it's the job of management, right, in many ways, to save that player from himself, because he's going to want to play. And especially, I think, when you're on that rookie deal money, which is significant, don't get me wrong, like that's a lot of money. But when you're your veteran money, like I think that there are just so many conflicts there that make that a really hard thing. And luckily the Dolphins have stepped in this week and are saying he's not playing, and it, sort of saving him from that. They have a very capable backup in Teddy Bridgewater, who I think is one of the most well-liked players and all that kind of stuff as a backup. We'll talk about backup quarterbacks in a little bit here, but, they're obviously righting a wrong right now, which is good. But like there's tons of things at play, and that's again why the NFL has to have these structures in place to save players from those situations.
Well, look, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Think about the waves of emotion, right? And the feelings. I'm sitting there listening to Mike Florio and Peter King opine on it. I mean, passion coming out of their ears, understandably so. When you're watching that game and you see Tua on the field with the neuro response in his fingers, that was sickening to me. And it's really interesting sometimes. You're not that old, but in my 50s, having been raised in this sport since the day I was born, and there was a little bit of wearing it on your sleeve idea when, you got back up, you shook it off and got on the field. We know so much more now, and we know we need to take care of it in the right way. I know Dr. Sills came out and mentioned that they did everything in the right way, and yet I think there was still a firing, right? And I do think there was some staggering around by Tua the game before when we thought maybe it was a concussion. I don't know. Personally, I've been around, football and injuries a lot in my life, whether it was rib injuries like Herbert, or whether it was concussions and back injuries. Somehow back injuries, I've never been in a back injury where it's made me more flexible and more loosey-goosey. That's a tough one, man.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I think my biggest thing is we all know, like, football is an amazing game. Like we all fall in love with it at a young age, and you grew up in it, I grew up in it, and it's just like we have to make sure. And it was the same thing during the COVID year and everything. It's like if you love this game, you have to make sure that you regulate it to an extent where these players are not discardable, right? You have to build a game, and you have to build a game. It's going to be a violent game, even if we follow all the rules. So let's follow all the rules. You know what I'm saying? And make sure that we're all in this together, type of thing. And that to me,
it's a great point, Eric. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I will say with all of this going on, we have made major strides in the league, or the league has, right? I really do believe that. The feeling and what we dealt with during all of those years with the Falcons, and how we evolved in that area and understood the importance of it. I do. I give the league major kudos on what they've been doing with it, from Rich McKay and the competition committee all the way through. The coaches are making major moves on trying to make sure that they are protecting. These kind of things slip through once in a while like this. I hope this was a real learned lesson for our league going forward.
For sure. Okay. Speaking of whether or not lessons are going to be learned, there's a team that I really loved going into the season, at least against the betting market. And I also felt like, they were being undervalued in the narrative space and everything. One of your former teams, you worked for them from 1994 to 97, the Wayne Fonts, Bobby Ross era, the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions just lost at home to Seattle, 48-45. They're 1-3. Unfortunately, they've had 3 home games out of 4 so far this year, but they're 1-3. They lead the NFL in points for, the 140 points for. Unfortunately, they lead the league in points against at 141. They, basically the Seahawks didn't punt. They missed a field goal. They had a couple drives end in field goals. They really only needed one stop to win that entire game and couldn't do it. Rashad Penny ran all over them. DK Metcalf was wonderful. Geno Smith has been a revelation. When you see a team like this, right, that is this kind of mismatch, right? Offense playing wonderfully, Jared Goff leading league in touchdowns, and defense just can't stop a nosebleed. As a general manager, what do you do? And is there anything you can do 5 weeks into the season?
5 weeks into the season, it is tough. Look, you're as a leader, you're supposed to be sound and solid and consistent. Of course, you're going to have the behind the scenes discussions. Brad Holmes is with Dan Campbell, and they are going to try to work like hell to figure out what is going on with this defense, because it is fun to watch their offense. It's fun to watch the run game. They can move the ball around with Goff and how he's passing the ball around. Of course, there's excitement and passion, and yet then you flip it over to the defensive side, and it is a complicated situation for co-team builders. What do we do? And we can talk about many layers, and I'm sure you have questions about that. The other thing that's really important for a team that's coming into their second year regime, and they have a lot on their plate. Not saying there's any hot seat at all. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is when you're a general manager and a head coach and you're building into the second year, you want to show significant improvements. You want to show consistency. You want to show toughness. I mean, there's not a toughness element there. You know that. The way that Dan carries himself, it's all authentic. But the one thing that happens, and I've been a part of defenses over the 13 years that I was in Atlanta, or 12 and a half, everyone corrects me, but the 12 and a half years, we had some really good, tough defenses. And when your defenses are good, your organization is perceived as, tough enough and edgy enough. But I've also had those times, of course, when the defenses were not good. And when you're flailing around on defense, it is an overriding theme shot towards your organization that you're not tough, you're not edgy, you're not gritty, unfortunately. And that becomes that's something that as team builders, you have to really look at. How do we make sure that this doesn't, capture the entire team? They have to write that defense.
Yeah, for sure. And even, your Super Bowl year in 2016, right? Like, you were transitioning from kind of a defense, the Paul Warlows of the world, and a little bit kind of, that second level, what wasn't quite as athletic. And then you draft Deion Jones, Devondre Campbell, who's still a damn good player. And you look at that 2016 team, first, right before your bye, every single game but one, you gave up 20 or more points. And then after your bye, you gave up 20 points or less in all but 2 games. And the last game of the season was, a game, against the Saints, who had a great offense. And they, that game kind of was, meant kind of nothing to you guys. So for the most part, like, you can turn this around. And the Detroit Lions have, I think we counted before, like 4 or 5 first round picks on that defense. They're not all drafted guys by Detroit, but maybe sometimes it's as easy as, just letting it play out and letting guys work into the system. Because that was not your second year in Atlanta, but it was Dan Quinn's second year in Atlanta. So much in the same way, you can just let the thing breathe, get some different players on the field maybe, or have those players get more comfortable. Is there ever a situation, though, where that doesn't work, where you have to cut a player or you have to make a trade or something like that, as far as, before the trade deadline, and you see somebody available? Is the problem ever that acute?
It can be that acute, no question about it. Now, let's call it the way it is. It's always going to start, what is going on with our scheme? What is going on with our coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball? Aaron Glenn, of course, is a very, very good football person, football man, of course. He put together the staff that they wanted to put together on that defense. Of course, that's part of it, man. I've been on the side of I've been hot. We've all been hot in this seat, in the team builder seat, whether it's head coach or GM. And it can get really hot when things are going awry like this. So the first thing is to try to look at what's going on with the scheme, of course, and have very candid conversations. But like I said, it is tough to start thinking about, just like aborting the mission, because you can't. You have to stay the course. You have people in that building who believe in staying the course. I mean, this. You have a guy like, Chris Spielman is in that building, although he's not as instrumental as he might be as a GM. He's there. He's a tough guy. He wants a tough defense. Everyone wants a tough defense to set the tone. And if the defense isn't happening that way, if you can't figure it out from a scheme standpoint, and you realize, and not only that, Eric, what do they have? 5, 6, or 7 first rounders on that defense? It's not like they're playing with a whole bunch of down the liners here.
Right.
That's a big thing.
Rodriguez is a 6th-round pick who's actually been their best player on defense as a linebacker. But you're right. Michael Brockers, Charles Harris, Aiden Hutchinson, Ali McNeil along the defensive line. They should be better than this. Okuda had a really good game against Justin Jefferson the prior week. He struggled a little bit against DK Metcalf. Amani Oruwariye had 6 interceptions last year. This year he is not playing quite as well. And Tracy Walker got injured in the Vikings game. That's a big loss for them. And yeah, it's harder, right? And defense is just so hard too, right? Because defense is a weak link system. Defense is a sum of the parts system. It's not as easy, like one of your signature moves as a GM, and one that I think, obviously worked out extremely well, was getting Julio Jones. That's a one player added to an offense and supercharges the offense. Defense, it's like, sure, you had the number 2 pick and you got Aiden Hutchinson, got Jeff Okuda the year before in year 3. That's still only 2/11ths of a defense. It's all interconnected type of thing. So to Brad Holmes's credit, he got out of the Matthew Stafford deal amicably, so they got another first-round pick from the Rams coming up here, as well as their own. So they should still be able to build there, and I still am optimistic for them moving forward. According to PFF, they still have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL, a top 5 easy schedule there. So I still think Detroit will get to 7 or 8 wins and be an encouraging side this year, maybe not a playoff team.
Well, if I can, my final comments on that, very good dialogue. I mean, I will say this. You can talk to any general manager. As much as we love scouting the defense and we want to put together the most badass defense that you can ever have, like there's something really just football about that, right? And yet it's not easy. It is, generally speaking, a lot more sort of directed and focused to be able to scout the offense. When you get defensive coaches in with different schemes, you think you have it set up. You might have the really good athletes in there, the fast guys, the explosive guys, tough ass guys, the guys who are going to come up and fill the gaps exactly how you think they're going to be. But then they get into a certain scheme. And I've been around that. Believe me, it is not always easy. I get that. This is not a dart at the coaches as much as it is. Defenses are complicated, and you might think you have the ideal outside linebacker, but he just might not be the exact fit for that style of defense. What I'm saying in the end, it's not easy to put together that bang up defense. I know they're praying for it, because for them to take it to the next level and to have the people behind them for years to come, they're gonna have to hit it on that defense.
Well, and injuries are so tough too, right? Like your 2016 draft was amazing. And then Keanu Neal, our friend Ricardo Allen, Deion Jones, even Grady Jarrett had his moments of being injured as well. Like injuries affect defense so much more than it affects offense, unfortunately. And that is something you can't account for as well, necessarily. And that makes it extremely hard as well. And you get injuries of even guys, if guys tough it out, it's not, guys, play might oscillate. Devondre Campbell was great early. Then he had a little lull at the end with Atlanta. He goes to Green Bay and he's a first-team All-Pro, right? So, I don't know, as somebody who drafted him, it's like you watch him and you're like, okay, that's the guy I drafted. It's like, but it's just like circumstances are so hard to navigate on defense, and so it's just a tough thing to do. And so I look at Detroit with a lot of empathy and say, okay, it can't get worse than this. And their offense is playing so well, and their offense putting up 45 without Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, DeAndre Swift, their interior of the offensive line with both guards were out. That's what I want to focus on with Detroit. And I want to say, okay, can the defense at least get me to 20th out of 32? Because I think if they do, they can win some football games this year. Speaking of an injury on an offense, though, that has not had a negative effect on a team, I look at the Dallas Cowboys, right? I got a lot of flack because I make a play caller metric every single year. I did it at PFF, and I used it in our betting models and everything. And a guy that always showed out really well in that metric was Kellen Moore. And I got a lot of flack this offseason because people saw the playoff game against the Niners, and people saw this and people saw that. And, I'm like, well, guys, the Dallas Cowboys led the league in scoring last year. That doesn't happen by accident. And you see early in the season, they're 3-0 with Cooper Rush, a guy they cut after the season and put on the practice squad. They unprotected him prior to the regular season, is now 3-0. Obviously, Dak Prescott's going to play given the investment and given how much he's a great quarterback. But what lessons can be learned when a backup quarterback is able to go in there and win football games, right? What lessons are learned, that you can apply to the Dak Prescott, where when he's playing, I think Dallas is a lot more sloppy is the wrong word, but I think they do less to help him. And when Cooper Rush is in, you can tell that Kellen Moore is really dialed in and helping that quarterback play. What can you learn from when a backup, and you didn't have this opportunity much in Atlanta, but what can you learn when a backup comes in and plays well for a starter, as far as what to do when the starter comes back?
Let me start by saying something you're not going to believe, and you're not going to agree with me necessarily. Maybe you will. You rip Micah Parsons off the draft board. That's what you do. That's the first thing. I just had to put my defensive spot in there, because what Micah Parsons doing for that team across the entire, both offense and defense, is amazing in my mind, setting tones and such. get back to your initial question. So good on an offensive coordinator to realize what he has, to understand within, we've talked about this with a number of other players, whether it even was Tua, right? Put Rush in the spot where he needs to be in and don't stretch him out there. Let him operate with some very good football people. You know that. He's got some really good players on that team. Yep. When you put a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of history in the right system, you build around that guy. You know that you put him in the right spot to be as successful as he can be, and then you put him alongside of some really good football players. Not saying all, but some really good football players. All of a sudden, that guy who everyone's thinking, he's kind of a midline quarterback, they start thinking, wow, he can get this done. To me, it speaks a great deal in volumes towards the ability within that franchise on the offensive side of the ball with the coordinator, with Kellen, what he's doing and how he's putting it together. And it allows you to think, hey, maybe, just maybe, this comes up all the time. I'm going to throw it back at you. That whole idea when I used to rip back at you when you were saying, you sure you want to sign Matt Ryan to another big contract? You can get someone a lot less expensive, put the Julio Joneses around him, and maybe you can do really well and affordably so.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that's the thing. It's like when you have a guy like CeeDee Lamb, who I know started the season slowly, but he's been great. Michael Gallup came back from an ACL. That offensive line's been banged up. That's the other part of the Mike McCarthy, Kellen Moore thing that's been really impressive is they got Jason Peters playing left guard for 15 snaps in the last game. And, they're still moving the ball. Zeke looks spry. Tony Pollard looks great. The tight end, they did it the other day without Dalton Schultz, who's a franchise tag tight end for them. So it's incredible. But yeah, it also shows you, right? Like, the Super Bowl that you were in against the Patriots was the only Super Bowl since 2012 that did not have a quarterback on rookie deal money. It just shows that like there is meat on the bone for a great coach, and the thing with Ryan was also Ryan was kind of in that area too, where he had a great offensive coordinator. You guys had a great draft that year. You had a lot of support, and you can buoy a guy who has it. You can make. I mean, Matt. The funniest thing was the Falcons is they made 2 Super Bowls. Their quarterback averaged 9 yards an attempt both years. It's like the 2 of the most efficient seasons of all time, and it just shows that like when you can get a bumper crop of players around a quarterback, that quarterback just looks so much better. And the easiest way to do it, and we've always talked about this, is to draft a guy high and to trade for guys like Tyreek Hill, trade for guys like AJ Brown. Use that extra money. The Chargers are doing it a little differently. They traded for Khalil Mack. They signed, Derwin James to an extension. They signed J.C. Jackson, so on and so forth. But like that is the path. And to me, what it does is it makes the guys who can compete while making the $45 million a year that much more impressive because they have less of that going for them. But what this shows is there is a way. The league has engineered a way for teams to compete when their quarterback isn't the greatest player on the team.
Right. I mean, look, you just very quickly, you flip over to New England. You don't think Bill was pulling his hair out, getting to his third? I mean, that gets really complicated. And if you don't mind, you didn't bite on you win through defenses Parsons comments. But the reality is there's Dan Quinn. Dan is doing a hell of a job this year. I want him to get another opportunity. I'm going to use this to pump him because he deserves another opportunity. The guy's a damn good football coach.
I have some statistics for you. So the Rams last year led the NFL in proportion of plays where their defense disguised coverage. It was 40%. So play too high or show too high, play one high, show one high, play too high. Dan Quinn's Dallas Cowboys are 50% this year, which is top in the league. No one stunts more than the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Cowboys stunt 6% more than any other team in the league. Their scheme uniqueness, which we'll go into that on a different podcast. We have more time, is off the charts as far as basically, when you look at like how different they run things, and it's because, and this is where I'll renege a little bit. Okay. There are times when there is a defensive player who has the stature to be a strong link player. Defense is normally weak link, right? Yeah. Lawrence Taylor was that player, right? Aaron Donald was that player. I think Rod Woodson was that player. Charles Woodson was that player. Micah Parsons is that player. Like Micah Parsons is a game ruiner. And so to your point, like they're not winning because of their offense, but their offense isn't screwing it up, certainly. And Micah Parsons is certainly that guy. And the crazy thing is going to be, where they play him, because the league is so different now. Back when LT played, you were an off-ball 3-4 linebacker. You were kind of a linebacker, more of a linebacker. Now guys either have to be edge players that rush all the time or off-ball guys who just blitz. And Parsons is kind of in that tweener area. He's killing it, though. Killing.
Well, look, and we'll finish off with this. We had Vic Beasley, and Vic, of course, led the sacks in that 16 year, and then he just plummeted, unfortunately. That's a whole other story. But Dan and I used to talk all the time how we could get him in the right spot to utilize his athleticism. I know Dan is just, in high cotton, so to speak, right now with what's going on, because he just loves the fact that he has a guy like that who can play anywhere and disrupt anywhere and come off with a real fun hop in his step and a levity about him. That cat's going to be leading that team for years to come, God willing.
Yeah, and they added to that Jaron Kearse, Anthony Barr, a bunch of guys who are not great, but they're versatile. And Quinn has certainly taken the versatility of all those players. Jaron Kearse last year was like one of the most productive players in the league, and he was a 7th round pick out of Clemson just like 5 years ago. Dan Quinn found a niche for him. Obviously, Trayvon Diggs the year before was terrible as a rookie, fantastic the last 2 years. So a lot of credit goes to him. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left. Let's go through Audible here a little bit. Let's go through some of the games this weekend, and I wanted to hit one of our last topics when we preview the Sunday night football game. But let's start Thursday night football. Two teams that are pretty disappointing. Okay, the Indianapolis Colts, they go to Denver. Both teams, Colts are 1-2-1. Their only win, a game I attended with against Kansas City 2 weeks ago. They're 3.5-point underdogs in Denver against a Broncos team that's 2-2. A really bad loss in my opinion in Vegas last week. We're gonna do a little bit of picking. I've experienced better. You obviously being in the league couldn't bet, so we're gonna sort of like look at this. But yeah, Denver is 3.5-point favorites, let's say, in this game. What do you think about this one, Thomas?
Look, it's so tough for me to go against my guy. I mean, Matt Ryan. He brought me into the league. It was my very first pick ever, and I won't even get in the emotional throw to the receiver who was a Michael Jenkins in that first time. I'm reminiscing, of course. Look, that's a tough situation up there right now. Look, I think Chris Ballard is a really good general manager. He puts together a really good football team, and yet they're searching again. There's some stuff going on that they're trying to figure out, and they're still working through some of that. I get it. I like where Denver is. I like it's been fun watching Russell Wilson. I like to see some of their players. I like to see what Judy's doing. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to cut it to the chase. I am going to take Denver and 3.5.
Okay. I'm going to be against you in this one. I am going to take the Colts. Jonathan Taylor's out. That sucks. I think they're going to lean more on Matt Ryan, which I think early downs is actually going to help them. Michael Pittman's been wonderful when he's played. Alec Pierce as well. Denver is going to be without Randy Gregory, a big acquisition for them. Patrick Surtain's been the best corner in football so far this year, so that's the one leak there. But I am going to go with the Colts. My friend John Park, who is one of the directors of analytics there, he was like, "Do you want?" Every time I go to Colts games, they win. So he was like, "I'm going to fly you to Denver this week." I said, "No, I'll leave it to God on this one." But I am still going to take the Colts. Getting the points there. The Ballard thing I do want to talk to you about on a different podcast. I think Ballard is extremely good at picking players, and with the bad luck at the QB position, bad luck at other positions, it hasn't quite turned out for him. But I still think he's got a shot to really be good there and turn that around. Okay, this one is an afternoon game. We're still going to get Cooper Rush. Dallas goes to Los Angeles to face the Rams. This game, before the Rams played Monday Night Football against the Niners, the Rams were favored by 6 at home. They're now favored by 4.5. So that Monday night game that you and I watched when we were on the phone, that one dinged the Rams in the eyes of the markets. What do you think about this one?
Wow. Well, I'll just cut to the chase on this one. I'll take the Rams and the points. Giving away.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take the Rams as well. Like, my thing here is it's about styles. Like, the 49ers do things that just screw with the Rams. They motion so that the Rams can't do all the cool stuff they want to do defensively. And there's a reason why the Niners have covered like in every single game against these two teams for like 2.5 years and have won all but the NFC Championship game last year. And that was, because Stafford had his interception dropped by Jaquiski Tart. Like, I don't take a ton fundamentally from the game Monday. It's just one of those where Shanahan, his teams always come to play against McVay. I think LA is going to, I think they're going to figure it out. Now, Parsons is going to be, a badass against that offensive line. But I still think LA outclasses them, especially with the backup quarterback playing for Dallas. Okay. I said this. I don't. Sunday Night Football, you have 2-2-2 teams, but I think they're moving. I think they're two differently yoked 2-2 teams. The Cincinnati Bengals, my hometown Cincinnati Bengals, they go to Baltimore. Baltimore's favored by 3. It was 3.5, but you have seen some Bengals money, and so it's moved it to 3. What I wanted to talk about a little bit was last week the Ravens had a chance to kick a field goal and go ahead against the Bills after surrendering a 17-point lead. They didn't. The Bills drive the length of the field. They would have scored a touchdown if they had to. They kicked the field goal instead. They go ahead and win. From a general manager's perspective, Thomas, when you see a coach go for that 4th down, do you see it as, obviously the numbers say to go for it? That, I think that's whatever. But do you see it as the coach trusts my offense to do it, or the coach doesn't trust my defense to do it? Because I think that you see both kind of narratives, swinging around here. What goes through your mind when somebody does something unconventional like John Harbaugh did Sunday?
If it were to be other offenses that you would be considering in this scenario, I might say they were questioning the offense, or he had a lot of faith in the offense, which I think he does, of course, with his quarterback and what they can do there and how they can blow it up. I just think that's where he was with it. I know that the Marcus Peter things blew up. Excuse me, I'm fumbling a little bit because I'm thinking about Peters and Harbaugh. I just watched it a little earlier. I hadn't seen the clip on it when he threw the FU at him or whatever he said. And I thought that's got to be a really tense situation because Marcus is probably thinking, why did you not trust us, basically? Yeah. And that can be complicated. That can bleed over into the building, as you know. Of course, ever the professional, Coach Harbaugh is going to say, there's, family, you're always going to fight. But without going protracting on that, again, I really do believe that I think that Baltimore can go in there, clean this up, and take this one this weekend.
Yeah, I do agree. I like the Ravens here. I like Sam Francis works for the Bengals. I think they do a pretty good job of in-game stuff as far as 4th downs are concerned. I just think Zach Taylor runs the ball a little bit too much on early downs, and sometimes that gets him into trouble. And then Burrow's got to face pressure. Odafe Owe, a 1st-round pick last year, is playing wonderful football. And they already have they just got Jason Pierre-Paul to come in and rush the passer. I think they're going to make Burrow's life a little bit harder. And Lamar Jackson right now, for my money, is the league MVP. And so, I see it happening that way. I'm a big fan of what the Ravens are doing just as a franchise, and I have been for quite some time here. All right, let's finish up on the team if I'm allowed to be a fan, the team I do root for, the Kansas City Chiefs, on Monday Night Football, favored by 7 against one of their rivals, the Las Vegas Raiders. Kansas City, a really good game against Arizona in week 1, a really good game against Tampa Bay last week, sandwiched between kind of a game they got lucky in winning against the Chargers, a game they played horribly against Indianapolis and got hawked from behind. Somewhat of an enigma, the Chiefs. The Raiders at 1-3 finally got their first win. Thomas, what do you think about this matchup?
I like seeing Josh McDaniel get the win, of course, because I think I've said this before. I think he's one of the most intelligent people in this league per offense, of course. I think he is, and I don't throw this word around a lot, especially as a former team builder in this league. I don't throw around genius, but he's the closest thing in my mind to be able to take people and players and know their abilities like Bill did. He taught him that, I'm sure, and then apply the offensive element to it and do what he's done. So I like seeing that. I think, obviously they have players there that we know can win. I just don't think they're in that groove right now. I think it was a big win for them one time here this past week. I think you have to give it to your team, as much as I don't want to give it to the Chiefs all the time, because I know you're just oozing with passion for the Chiefs. Even in our meetings today, you brought up the Chiefs. I knew we wouldn't get through a 9-hour meeting without you not bringing up the Chiefs. So I'm going to toss it to you.
Yes. And my, I was made fun of a lot at my old job I was called the Kansas Simpy Chief because I simped for the Chiefs all the time, apparently. So that was a scarlet letter I wore around with my homerism there. If anything, I do take the Chiefs laying the points here. The Raiders have a lot of talent. I think the Chiefs defense is much improved. In fact, one of the topics I do want to talk about is, the Chiefs made a fundamental regime shift this offseason with Brett Veach moving from more of a stars based approach, right? More like an LA Rams based approach to more of a spread it out, spread your risk out type of situation with the Tyreek Hill trade and not re-signing Tyrann Mathieu and so on. And so far that defense looks like it's bearing the fruit of that regime shift for him. So we'll see if it continues. The Raiders are nothing to sneeze at. And as we talk about privately, like, I think with Josh McDaniel, you're probably much better off starting out 0-3 and then working your way to being good than starting out 6-0 like he did in Denver and getting everybody's hopes artificially up. And then, so I don't think the Raiders are a disaster. I think that they're moving in a good direction here, but I think the Chiefs are going to be a tough test for them. So that's what I'm going to go with here. So
yeah.
And that's our first show. And we almost made time.
We almost made it. I looked up and I saw it.
And I gotta say, I think we both learned a lot. I hope the listeners learned a lot as well. We'll be back next week with more of a discussion of the NFL and the topics we didn't get to today. But for Thomas Dimitroff, this has been Eric Eager. This is the SumerSports Show.